Eighth graders, we are back again. We're still in section 6.1, but this time we're going to look at example 3, and we are going to evaluate expressions this time. Remember, evaluate is just a fancy way of saying plug in for the variable. Plug the number that's been given to you in for the variable that it stands for. And that's really all we're doing today, is evaluating each expression for the given value of the variable. So let's look at letter A. We have x to the negative 1, and they tell us that x is equal to positive 2. Now there's a couple of ways you can actually go about this, and I'm going to let you decide what works best for you. You could take your x to the negative 1 and go ahead and plug in right this second and just say, I'm going to go ahead and plug in positive 2 for the x. And then I'm going to rearrange it and go, hey, I've got 2 raised to the negative 1. I can't leave it that way. I must simplify this. And I'm just going to go ahead and move to the negative 1 down to the bottom. And of course, 2 to the positive 1 is very simply 1 over 2. Okay? And you can do it that way, where you plug in right away for the variable. Or, let me kind of separate my board here, or you could say, you know what, I want to go ahead and I want to move the negative number, the negative exponent first, get that dealt with, and then I want to plug in after it's all said and done. Okay, that would work too. And so what you do from here is you go, well, I can't leave x to the negative 1, up top. It's actually negative in the numerator, so I'm going to bump it down to the bottom, and it'll become x to the positive 1. And now I'm going to plug in my 2, and then I'm done, because 2 to the first power is just 2. I don't really care which way you do it. You just need to do what makes sense to you, okay? So letter B, we have a to the 0 times b to the negative 3. Now, I will tell you right away that anything to the 0 power is what? Oh my goodness, I hope I heard it. I think I'm hearing some whispers or screams or yells of 1. So really, you can mark out a to the 0 power. You don't really need to plug in the number for that, because remember what I told you, anything, any variable, any number, any fraction, any decimal raised to the 0 power is always 1. And you got it. So you can actually ignore that. That's just 1. And now it's really just 1 times b to the negative 3. So really our focus is just changing b to the negative 3. So like I told you above, you can either change it before you plug in, and you can go, hey, that's actually 1 over b to the 3rd. And I'm going to go ahead and plug in negative 2 for b. Now be careful here. I would, any negative number you plug in, put it in parentheses, and then solve it. And negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 should be negative 8. And you'll end up with 1 over negative 8. Or you could plug in from the get-go. And you could say, I'm not going to remember that a to the 0 is 1. And you can just go ahead and plug in 8 to the 0. You can do 8 to the 0 times negative 2 to the negative 3 power, and then simplify it from there. That's really up to you to decide how you want to do that. I just want to try and give you as many shortcuts as possible. You decide how you want to handle it. Okay? C is very simple. You just have p to the negative 3. You can go ahead and move that to the denominator, making it 1 over p to the positive 3, and then go ahead and plug in your positive 4. If it would make you more comfortable to just always plug in numbers in front of an exponent in parentheses, just do it that way. It's not wrong. It doesn't hurt anything. It's actually a really safe thing to do. And then you've got 4 to the 3rd. We got to figure that out. So 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times another 4 is 64. And you'll end up with 1/64 is what you'll end up with there. Now let's move on to letter D. We've got 8 times a to the negative 2 times b to the 0. Now I hope you see what drew my eye right away was that b to the 0 power. Remember what I've been hammering since the very first lesson. Anything to the 0 power is 1. Anything. And that is, the only thing being raised to the 0 power is the letter b. So we can just go ahead and cancel that out. We already know that this is 1. We already know that. Don't need to plug in for b. You can if that makes you feel better. You don't need to. It's an unnecessary step, especially if you can identify at this moment that b to the 0 is actually just another way of saying 1. Okay? So let's clean it up a little bit and let's see what we've got left here. We really just have 8 times a to the negative 2. Now I like to simplify before I plug in, so I'm going to leave the 8. See, 8 has an understood exponent. Do you see that exponent right there? It's an understood 1. So 8 already has a positive exponent. So we're going to leave 8 right where it is. It doesn't need to move. It already has the positive exponent we want on it. The only thing that needs to move is that a to the negative 2. We're going to move it down to the bottom just like that. Now, if you weren't quite sure what just happened, let me reiterate to you, okay? First of all, we got rid of b to the 0 because we said anything to the 0 power is 1. So just mark it out. It's unnecessary. Multiplying by 1, anything times 1 is itself, okay? That left us with 8 times a to the negative 2. Now, don't get this mistaken impression that 8 and a are both being raised to the negative 2. There aren't parentheses around the 8 and the a. Only the a is being raised to the negative 2. The number 8 has an understood exponent of positive 1. Because its exponent is positive, we're going to leave it right here in the numerator, and we're going to pop that a to the negative 2 underneath it because that's the only thing that has a negative exponent. Okay, so that was a recap. Let's plug it back in, and let's plug in negative 2 for that a, and then let's simplify. Remember, negative 2 raised to the second power is the same thing as negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. And we're finished. We simplified the whole thing. So that's evaluating. I think the hardest one here was letter D. Most confusing, but hopefully I did a good job in explaining why the 8 stayed up top and why the a to the negative 2 needed to be moved down to the bottom. Now, if we need to talk about one like this one in class, please bring your questions to class and let's talk about it a little bit more. Thanks for listening.